Hey, welcome to ReadIT. Today we have r/AskReddit, and the user Vibrantia is asking, for those who have been in jail during this pandemic, what was your experience like? I was kept in a private holding cell all day, no breaks. Only human contact I had was when meals were passed through a small hole in the door. 3 days straight, no book, no nothing. It sucked. That sounds very dehumanizing. Were you just left in your cell alone? Yes. I think they should make COVID prisons where all prisoners are put in cells with retractable roofs. They can have a food chute to drop a nutritious food supplement directly into the cell. We can have showers in the cell so that there is no human contact. With the retractable roof, we can give the inmates an hour of sunlight a day. For safety, we can remove all books and TVs. My uncle is in prison in British Columbia. He said it's really boring. All he does is sit around and watch TV in his cell. They're on full lockdown, so he only gets let out for 3 meals a day and 2 to 3 times a week to shower, only a certain amount of people at a time, and social distancing. He can't see any visitors, and everything with probation officers has been delayed. Thankfully, no COVID cases in his prison because of their strict rules. Thank you for sharing. What's the hygiene situation like? I'm assuming it's pretty up to standard considering no COVID case. He hasn't said anything about it, and he's a clean guy, so I'm assuming they're doing well with hygiene. I work in a prison, librarian, and we recently had a month-long lockdown. My prison is minimum security, which means that on a normal day, there is basically complete freedom of movement for the inmates except during head count. So imagine going from that to being locked in your cell 23.5 hours per day. It was a pretty depressing month for me. I basically spent all day in my office in a closed, silent library, and once a day I was pushing a book cart around with people's requests, puzzles, stuff like that. I had no contact with any of my regulars during that time, and worried about them a lot. A few of them sent me notes assuring me they were okay, which was touching. I still have to get on people's cases about wearing masks. Compliance among both staff and inmates is really bad, and I'm told it's worse at other facilities. Everyone is just tired, and a lot of inmates are deep into conspiracy theories, so some of them think the whole thing is a hoax anyway. Weird question, but what kind of literature are inmates generally interested in? Poppy fiction? Turgid Danielle Steele romance novels? Non-fiction text to prepare for the outside world? The latest editions of Car and Driver? My partner is doing a long bit in Texas. He told me that Stephen King type books are popular, as are urban books. To be honest, I'm not totally certain what he meant by that. I send him sci-fi books which he loves and passes them around to some of the dudes on his block. He's currently halfway through the Expanse series. I'll be ordering books 5 and 6 this week. Urban books are popular at my facility too. It's fiction geared towards an African American audience, set in cities and often with themes of crime or romance. Probably the most widely known urban fiction novel is The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah. I was in medium security prison when COVID came. Everyone was panicked. The guards joked around about it until one of them died from it. They then used quarantine on anyone they had a grudge against on that day. Quarantine was in the solitary block. No radio, TV, books, etc. They locked down our pod several times. Which means you don't leave your cell for 2 weeks. Once a week they rolled a portable shower stall to our cell door. At the time we didn't know how serious it was and how at risk our families were on the outside. There is no phone calls in quarantine. Families had no idea why they hadn't heard from us. Then the hunger strikes. One prison in our state had a riot. The governor called for early release for low-risk prisoner with short time remaining, which left a lot of people bitter that weren't chosen. The extortion that was normal was ramped up hard on people getting out. A guy in the cell next to me died from a heart attack, and they left his body for 2 days before they came in bio suits to remove him. It was a real shit show. I got out in October 2020. The holding cell still has multiple people, but folks keep their distance for the most part. Couple people chatting together, but they probably came together. Cops didn't even have to yell at folks to stay apart, which is better than I can say for the regular world. I was released before being transferred to an individual cell, so I can't speak to that. Otherwise, it was basically the same as usual. Cops don't keep 6 feet away from you or anything like that, they just wear masks. Exactly the same as usual, except they give out masks when you go in. Spent 3 days in county. Never made it to Gen Pop, They handed me 2 of the cheap blue masks and put me in a holding cell with 15 to 20 other dudes. I used the extra mask to cover my eyes when I was sleeping on the floor. I live in the south though, and this was back in August. A majority of the people around me don't believe in corona. Work in a UK prison. Currently at 23.5 hours in a cell each day, showers one day and exercise the next. They come out of their cell in bubbles of around 30 people to stop the virus spreading. You may think this is excessive and a breach of human rights, but these guys just have zero concept of social distancing. The second a group are unlocked, you just find them huddled up in cells, on the yard virtually shoulder to shoulder, refusing to wear masks. I can't tell you the amount of arguments I have had with people outright refusing to wear masks. It's frustrating and starting to spread like wildfire through the prisons now. It's inevitable, I guess, but for everyone, staff and prisoners, it's flipping hard work right now. My brother is in ATM, and when you first get there, in Ontario, you have to isolate for 2 weeks even with a negative test. You get 1.5/2 days served or something like that for it. Anytime you go out of the jail for hearings, same thing all over again from what he told me. You're stuck in your cell all day and only have a small window of time to shower, call people, etc. He hasn't even talked to his lawyer about his case and can't even have an in-face hearing. It's a Zoom meeting for his bail hearing this week. He said not the normal amount of guards on duty, and it's pretty normal. Essentially just on a normal lockdown before COVID. Throw away for obvious reasons. I live in the States. I had to turn myself in for a misdemeanor warrant, so I drive to the jail and the lobby is empty. There's a paper stuck on the front door with a number on it. I call it and they politely tell me an officer will be out to arrest me soon. I plop down and watch the sun rise for about 45 minutes, and then a guy finally comes out with cuffs. We walk around to the back of the building, enter door 1 and wait for it to close behind us before entering door 2. I am frisked and asked to remove my mask and open my mouth wide, then allowed to put my mask back on. They sit me down and ask me if I'm experiencing any COVID symptoms as well as a mental health questionnaire. After wrapping up that interview, I am put in holding with 3 other men, none of which have masks on. They actually seemed jealous of mine, asking if I brought it or if they gave it to me, and said that theirs were removed when they were arrested. They would put 2 other men in holding with us, neither of which were wearing their mask. Left the box a total of 4 times in about 10 hours. Only the COS had masks, none of the inmates did. Paid my bond and was released in the afternoon with my butthole's integrity still intact. Overall, I got the vibe that the jail didn't really care about COVID at all, and personal protection was up to you. Now that I'm out on bond, one have a monthly meeting with my probation officer, which is a 5-minute phone call. Never been drug tested, and I still don't have a court date or any development in my case after about 6 months. Got brought in for assault back in July. They had orders not to hold any unnecessary people, so the holding cells all had like 3 people max. I got my own cell and they let me go after a couple hours cause they didn't want the extra body there. Here. All jails and prisons were on strict guidelines and lockdowns. Basically anyone coming to jail was quarantined and movement was very limited. All small petty crimes were looked at and the system worked on getting the minor violators out of the facilities. Anyone who was close to parole were also let out. Visitation was completely stopped at all dock facilities. Basically the inmates were kept isolated in their section. My facility is prison and jail. All intake was actually stopped due to quarantine at the jails. Usually we would help with the jail overflow and take X amount. Instead, people were left at the jails for several months before being moved. Our population for the first time ever began to decline due to so many releases. All transports were stopped. If you had a court date, it was done via phone or video. It became mandatory for all facilities to clean non-stop. For us, COS were constantly checked temperature-wise and asked COVID symptom questions before passing through the lobby door. Face masks were mandatory and we had to wear them on the units at all times. Hand sanitizer was also supplied to us to keep on our person. It sucked for the convicts and inmates alike. Some really went stir-crazy with the rec, library, and other activity changes that were limited or completely stopped. My husband is currently in prison. We can't visit at all. If anyone is exposed, they all go into lockdown. They get tested for COVID a lot. Have to wear their mask and take other precautions. They do get to go to work detail, but it's been shut down a few times when they were all out on lockdown. Locked in a single cell, solitary confinement, until they needed the room with no COVID precautions ever being taken. including when I was finally taken to a regular unit. No temperature check, no health questions. Yet the corrections officers won't be caught dead without fresh gloves and masks. I did say at least a Bible ECT, and I'd expect the prison chaplain to have that covered. Obviously everyone should be offered something to keep their minds occupied. You really need to sort out staff who may have contempt towards prisoners, or particular prisoners, otherwise, they'd simply offer a pile of books with no interest. Anyone can offer a stack of boring books. The prisoners' abilities and interests need to be established immediately. It isn't difficult. I.e., within seconds, you could just reel off your interests to me. It all depends what that particular prison wants to achieve. Nothing difficult if you have organization, but it seems the truth is, staff may believe they are creating a holiday camp, and with that mentality you have no chance of creating an environment conducive to reforming inmates. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to stay away from jail.